Welcome to the Injection Connection, in-depth discussions with thought leaders and professionals in the polyurethane infrastructure repair industry, hosted by Jim Spiegel, Vice President of Alchemy Speed Tech and board member at the International Concrete Repair Institute.
Okay, so we're live here. This is episode 4 of the Injection Connection with the host here, Jim Spiegel. On this episode, we have A1 Foundation Crack Repair. We have Adam and Rich on. You guys are obviously both very experienced chemical grouting professionals, mostly on the residential side. So what I'm going to do is turn it over to you guys and have you tell us just a little bit about your company and how you guys got into chemical grouting, and let you take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Thanks for having us on. Actually, it's a little side note. Rich is out of the office at the moment here, so you only get yours truly and me today. But I feel like I can carry the torch forward here for us. So A1 Foundation Crack Repair was basically founded by accident in the 90s. Rich, who was the founder of the business, was in home construction and flipping homes prior to flipping even being a word, and rehabbing homes. And he came across a house that had a pretty significant fire in it. And part of the issues were in the foundation were that there were some significant cracks that leaked water. And being a pretty savvy individual, kind of knew that the hydraulic cement option that most people and homeowners will try was a short-term solution, and he was going to try to sell this house over a period of a few months, and wasn't sure if a hydraulic cement was going to withstand some of the issues that were experienced in this foundation. And came across the chemical injection grouting process, and used it on that first house, and then said, well, this is a pretty interesting process, and started to build a business around the technology and the methods that he discovered, kind of doing it on his own to figure it out. And builders became interested in it and kind of grew the business from there. So 25 plus years later, now I'm involved here as a second generation in the business. And our primary market that we focus on is residential foundations, although we do probably about 10% or so of commercial work as well. But the vast majority of the work that we do are for homeowners, just like the rest of us around here, just have an issue in their foundation and have tried all the off-the-shelf products and kind of have given up and tried to find something a little bit better and more robust, and that's where we come in and offer solutions.
Got it. So are you guys primarily offer, obviously foundation crack repair, that's your focus. What other services do you guys offer?
Yeah, foundation crack repair is the core of the business. It's what the business was really founded on, but we also do all sorts of other foundation repairs as well. We do structural repairs. We do older homes. So we're in the New England area, so we have a lot of homes that are built prior to 1920 with fieldstone foundations, very common in this area. So we see a lot of fieldstone foundations that we use repointing techniques on, and we actually use some of this injection material in there as well to help waterproof from the inside out. And we install permanent lally columns in these older homes, and we also do some sump pumps. So we basically stay below the first level of homes, and we pretty much do everything in and around the foundation, whether the home is concrete, stone, or block. We kind of have a tool for every application.
Sounds good. So with the homes you typically work on, so you guys are suburbs of Boston, correct?
Correct.
So what type of age of substrates do you guys come across? And with that age, I'm assuming there's probably very little, if not complete lack of membrane work, or waterproofing on the positive side. But I'm sure oftentimes it's just unknown, because of the age of the buildings. So you experience that?
Yeah, it's very common. Obviously, when we're getting into stone foundations, you can pretty much not have anything like that. you're really relying on the dirt there. No, but as we get into earlier construction, 1920s and into the 30s, concrete construction, you know, it, your guess is as good as anybody's whether or not. Obviously, nowadays when you get new construction and anything that was built in the last 20 plus years, you're more likely to have something there. But even then, as we know, those the tarring and the positive side waterproofing is no good if there's a crack that opens up there that's more than a 1/16 of an inch wide. So once you have that opening to the outside, regardless of whether or not there is some positive side waterproofing, usually there's still some chance that water is going to be coming through there. But yeah, these older homes, it's a guessing game, and usually it's not something we even really worry too much about, because we know that the homeowner's having an issue and they're just looking to have it resolved.
Certainly, yeah. And the residential game, in my experience, so I've been in the chemical grouting industry for, I don't know, 15, 16 years, something like that. Professionally, I guess it's all I've done. So, I've been around a large breadth of products, from geographical considerations to building or substrate age considerations. And I really see the residential market as kind of a different beast, to be honest. I mean, there's so much need, obviously, because, my parents have, block walls that leak regularly, and originally from Pennsylvania, and these wet areas that, with basements, block basements, it's a huge problem. But kind of the biggest thing I've seen is setting expectations. I think that's probably the biggest challenge on the residential side, where, on the on the commercial or industrial side, or even civil side, when we're looking at water control with chemical grouting, say like a secant pile or a slurry wall, managing the water, say 90% is largely successful, just controlling the water. Whereas on the residential side, the expectations, setting expectations are just key. Because if you do Mrs. Jones's basement, obviously, and, it has even a little trickle of a leak that's still persistent, then that's deemed a failure. So would you agree with that assessment, that it's a different animal? And if so, how would you suggest, you set expectations accordingly?
Yeah, I mean, it is a different animal, because again, you're dealing with a person in their home. So it's very personal to them. They don't care if you got 98% of it. They don't want any water coming in. So most homes that we're dealing with, we know that we're going to be able to provide waterproofing for that house, with a warranty on the work. There are some applications that are going into it knowing that it's going to be a very big challenge, whether it is like you said, a block wall, stone foundation. It's a totally different game. But usually with the concrete construction, we're able to prevent water from coming in. But we do have that conversation with the homeowner that, your expectation from us is that you're going to have your problem solved, and you'll get a warranty with that work. And if for some reason it does trickle in this area, well, we're on the hook for it up to a certain period of time once the warranty expires. But usually we are able to get it in the vast majority of cases, because for residential construction, there aren't a ton of variables. They're pretty standard construction. It's pretty standard concrete types, and the admixtures that go in there are not crazy. So it's a pretty well-known commodity in terms of what you're getting. But the challenge is that the homeowner, it's their home. It's personal to them. So it's a big part of our business is to make sure that we get it right. And so we make sure we take our time and really evaluate how this wall is presenting, and how if there's deflection on it where one side's pushed out, if there's structural issues that are going on with it besides just a little bit of a crack. Has the footing dropped? Is the compaction of the soil a question here? So there's all these things. Do they have gutters? Do they have perimeter drains? Do they, what other mechanisms do they have here on this house to help really alleviate their concerns. But, we try to evaluate everyone case by case just to make sure that, all expectations are set. But in general, we're trying to get these things airtight and watertight, on the first shot.
That's the idea, certainly.
Yep.
So you mentioned, you touched on it, the block wall is, I think on the resident, as far as chemical grouting goes for leak seal, in my opinion, block wall, hydrostatic conditions, even sometimes even more challenging would be like seasonal leaking conditions, where you don't necessarily see your results at the time of application. How do you assess, say, an old block wall, water infiltration, floor wall joints, footer geometry unknown, membrane unknown? Could you walk us through a little bit, kind of how you guys would assess something like that?
Yeah, I mean, block construction is always, I think, one of the most challenging applications in the residential market, because with the stone walls, field stone walls, while they're all like a fingerprint as being, individual and unique, materials are very basic, and the structure was never meant to be a totally, impervious layer. Whereas block construction, did they fill the cells? Did they not fill the cells? Is there a footing? Is there no footing? What's the age of this construction? Block construction for us in the Northeast is pretty common to be in the 20s and 30s and sometimes even earlier. So you have these, 100-year-old blocks that have been sitting there. Some of them have been painted, 25 times over the years, right? So
right.
Those are the most challenging. So a lot of times it's, looking for obvious signs of water. I mean, it's almost, sometimes what we do is almost so basic, it's silly, but it's, you walk into the house and you try to evaluate as you see. So are there obvious flaws in the foundation walls that are, whether it's a crack, whether it's a vertical crack showing that a footing has dropped or there's been some differential settling, or do you see a step crack or a bulge in the foundation wall, which is suggesting a lateral movement with the soil pressures or a tree or whatnot? It might be outside the root system pushing on it. So you really try to evaluate, the flaws first, see what those are, and if that is the source of the issue. And then if that's not the source of the issue, or if that's not really, you don't see anything like that, is it just, are we dealing with ancient, concrete, CMUs that are just, having water pour through them? And in those cases, if they're not painted, now you're really talking about negative side waterproofing for what we do. I mean, there's other things you can do on the outside that is not in our company's, wheelhouse. But what we do is all the negative side waterproofing techniques, whether it's usually we're not injecting, but sometimes it could be injection. It could be using carbon fiber technologies. It could be using crystallized quartz based cementitious materials. Could be another crystallized quartz based sprays to help create a hydraulic barrier. So there's a number of things to it, but it always starts with trying to identify the areas where they're having issues. And a lot of times homeowners will say, well, how do I know and where it's coming in from? And usually what will, the process is pretty archaic in terms of what it is, but running a garden hose out and outside, because everyone has a garden hose generally and an outside spigot, and letting it run in the areas where they think it's coming in from, and just letting it run for 20, 30 minutes at a time with 10-minute intervals of it being off to allow it to saturate the soil, usually starts to tell us exactly where the water's coming in from. Maybe it's at that floor wall seam, and are you looking at putting in material on that floor wall seam? Well, what if it's the whole wall? And well, now you're dealing with a hydraulic table issue. So you might be looking at a sump pump system or similar. So it's really, every situation is unique in a lot of ways, but a lot of them are really just trying to evaluate the problem areas. In the philosophy of our business and A1 Foundation Crack Repair is to address the problems as they are, versus trying to swing for the fences and give you a whole house solutions that 95% of the basement doesn't need, but one area might. So we really try to focus on the problem areas because homes are so personal and they're, where your family are, and you store all your personal belongings in the basement. Really the goal for any homeowner is just keep it dry,
Yeah.
keep the humidity levels and moisture levels down. So we really try to just focus on that.
Yeah, you touched on a good point though. You mentioned that every situation is different, for you to solve the problem. And I think that is an important distinction about chemical grouting as well, that our company is very honest, we feel, with and transparent, with clients, and we always say, if you can expose the positive side and apply a new membrane system, I mean, that's your go-to, right? So and that wouldn't involve chemical grout at all. So we're very honest about that. And chemical grouting is kind of it's a club to have in your bag, so to speak, when there really are no other options, in that below grade setting. So we always try to also set that expectation that we're here to help address this problem that you have. We didn't create the problem, but we're going to try to find a solution. And sometimes that takes, as you're saying, kind of a cocktail of treatments. Maybe your little crack injection, maybe a little curtain grouting, even down to a sub pump. Which kind of leads me into another discussion. We were in some meetings last week, and we were talking to some companies about doing some drain options on the negative side, and it sounds like you guys do that as well. When would you opt for water diversion, such as a drain, in lieu of or in place of chemical grouting?
Yeah, so we actually don't really get into drain systems, so to say. We do some pumps, but we don't do perimeter drain systems. In general, most homes are not a really good candidate for it. I mean, they're in older homes where you have, maybe no footing at all, or it's a fieldstone foundation, and your goal is to be 100% dry because you want to turn it into living space. That's where a perimeter drain might be a better option. Sometimes where we have the precast bulkheads that are just, the compaction of the soil was really poor when they dropped it in there. After they dropped it in there and tightened it up, we have, you just have too much movement, and so that seal around the foundation to the precast section is just, it's too much movement on an annual basis with the freeze and thaw cycle. So you see putting a grate in front of the door to help alleviate any sort of flooding into the basement there. But in general, our philosophy again is to really deal with the problem that there is first. And if there is an area where it's just, there's too much water coming in different areas because it's, it was built on a swampland that nobody knew about until they unearthed some drawings from 1915. Then you're dealing with a different issue there. So, but yeah, I would say in general, most of the vast majority of the applications that we see are not good candidates for these, but it could be more of a pinpoint kind of approach of trying to deal with each area individually. But again, every house has its own complications, and every house has its own unique challenges that we have to work around. And sometimes the perimeter drain system is the best solution, but it generally can be solved a little bit more cost effectively than trying to dig out the 4 inches of concrete around your perimeter.
Right. So in a more general sense, with the chemical grouting industry, what do you think? And I may be putting you on the spot here a little bit, but what do you think is lacking, or what could be improved in the industry? Do you have any opinions on that? Maybe from a product standpoint, maybe from maybe from a service standpoint, from a manufacturer side. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I've had a pretty unique entry into this industry because I'm from totally outside of the industry. Even though this is a family business, I actually spent the first 10 plus years of my career as a manufacturer rep in the fire protection space. So I'm coming at this industry as a very different set of eyes. I was actually engineer in civil engineering, and I would definitely say that it's a niche industry in a lot of ways, which prevents its usage. I think because I don't think it's well taught on an educational level, and I don't think the awareness is very high amongst a lot of engineering firms as well, because it's a process that is unique in a lot of ways, but it's not revolutionary. And I think while it's one tool in the tool belt, as we discussed, I think having that in an engineer's hands is very important, because a lot of times solutions that are kind of tried more often, or may have a higher success rate on the positive side, are just cost prohibitive. And the building is not set up to be able to do that kind of stuff post construction. And where chemical grouting really just is the best, most cost-effective, high-result solution for that particular application. So I would definitely say that on a commercial level, that the grouting process needs to have a little bit higher expansion in terms of in educational areas, to make sure that kids coming out of schools and going in for their PEs and trying to get their feet under them and provide solutions to their clients know that this is a proper solution that is tried and true and is very successful. In my world, where it's a lot of residential, that's half of what my job is on a day-to-day conversation with the customer, is explaining what we're doing, because it's a lot of black magic in their eyes, because it's something totally different. They were looking for the black spray in the can that you used to spray in the bottom of your screen door boat there off the shelf,
right,
as a solution, and they're trying to figure out why it didn't work. And really, so we're trying to just educate them a little bit as well. But we've had projects in the past where they've spent a tremendous amount of time on the specifications and the procedures on how to address an issue. We had a project at a wastewater treatment plant where it's 24-inch thick walls with rebar everywhere, tall. I forget how tall they were, but they were tall. And they're just trying to. There's not a lot of experience. There wasn't a lot of manufacturer help in terms of how to really identify the process to do this successfully. And so when we get in there and we look at the specifications, it's cobbled together by somebody who's never seen this process in the real world. And it was essentially set up for failure in a lot of ways, because the process was wrong for this particular application. And trying to go through change orders on the process was a very difficult situation, just because we knew, as a contractor doing it for as long as we have, that the amount of time and effort that they were going to be focused on their particular process was going to be set up incorrectly and set up for failure, mostly because, again, they had a set of people on this thing who have read about it and were very unaware of the infield techniques that are required to be successful in it, and really just tried to be by the book on it without any sort of experience. So I think that the industry would be a huge, there'd be a huge benefit across the board in my eyes to really start at the educational level, civil engineering programs, construction management programs, to really focus on that. And I think manufacturers have some responsibility, as well as contractors as well, to kind of give a two-pronged approach, so that people are educated both on the technology of itself and the actual application and how it gets done.
Couldn't agree more. First of all, though, you mentioned the spray on, the spray on black stuff.
I'm not sure if we're allowed to call it by name, but
Right, yeah. So but it's funny you bring that up, because you got to tip your cap from a sales and marketing standpoint. I mean, those infomercials are fantastic, But it's we actually came out to a job where they sprayed that on, and this was like an underpass. So it was the city was the client, for a new roadway. So I mean, pretty high level sort of recommendation, and we couldn't couldn't believe that that's, what was recommended as a spray on from the negative side. But no, our technical director, Charlie, often says, I've heard it in his pitch, in many presentations, that, our biggest challenge isn't another competitor in the industry. Really is in the industry as a whole, our biggest challenge is education. And, if we could fully educate the engineering and design professional world, on product selection and, why and where and how, the chemical grouting industry as a whole would probably be much, much larger, as far as a market size. We see a lot of times people would just go out there and typically it's just a technique or a mixing issue. Maybe they're drilling too sharp of an angle, or they're not, pumping enough material, or maybe they mixed it incorrectly, or maybe they're simply using a gel where they should have used a foam, and vice versa. You go out on a job and you make those mistakes, and sometimes those associated engineers and consultants have a bad taste in their mouth. So I couldn't agree with you more on the education piece. But to the education piece, I also have a contact of mine who's kind of has an architectural background that got him into the industry. And one of the things that that he's told me a few times, and he went on to have just a superb career in construction chemicals. But one of the things that we talk about a lot is, through engineering and architectural studies, there's a ton of book work, obviously, right? I mean, you said that you're an engineer by education, correct? Civil?
Yep.
So what we really feel like one of the things that's missing is just that job site stuff. I mean, we talk about where do we find talent, and that's a big thing in our world, especially being so niche of an application. How do you find talent? And one of the things that we like to look at is, hey, let's get somebody with an engineering mind, such as yourself, right? Engineering or architectural mind that just knows buildings and knows the X's and O's, so to speak, of the construction world, and just get them on site, just to learn. And we think that could be a kind of the 1-2 punch, to really get good, competent people out there. Because I mean, you're a perfect example of it, right? I mean, you come in with a very high level of understanding of the construction world and building in general, and then couple that with some field training, and you're pretty lethal as far as your effectiveness in the field. So to that point, how long do you think it takes? Say somebody coming out of college, I have a bachelor's in engineering. Maybe I don't want to work in an engineering firm. Maybe I want to get into the sales side with a manufacturer of building products, right? How long do you think it takes field time with chemical grouting until you're kind of up and running and you really know the nuances of a lot of what happens out there?
That's a tough question. I mean, I'll kind of use myself as a little bit of an example because, while I'd been around it for a while, because I had gone my own path for a period of time right out of school, it was kind of just there and didn't really know much about it. I think I mean, in doing it every day, it was a good, again, with my educational background of being an engineer in the civil engineering space, knowing building and construction, it took me a good 2-3 months of everyday hands-on application to really understand the limitations, the successes, how it works, why it works, where it's going, which product is going to be most successful in which application. Before it was, I was comfortable, being able to see the solution before I even put a drill to the wall. And the unfortunate thing is that, I was able to rely on years of construction experience and being in these, green builds. Whereas somebody who might be right out of school has never been on a site, has never thrown on the hard hat and the vest and walked around. So there's a whole learning curve to that as well. But again, the field experience, I think, is critical in in any industry, and especially as you get more and more isolated niche industries, your opportunity to learn it is few and far between on a study level. And so the field experience becomes your classroom. So when we bring people on, in turn talks about finding good people. If we find somebody who has any experience in injection grouting, it's it's a diamond in the it's a needle in a haystack, so to speak. So there's a significant training curve on our end to bring talented people who have these construction experience to a level of being able to be proficient in the trade. So it's a tough thing because everyone's individual, but the more time in the field, I think, is critical, because of, again, if you happen to be taught it in some educational level, it was a blip on the radar, and it was quickly moved past as part of a envelope education study. Whereas the actual time in the field is really becomes your classroom, like I said.
Absolutely. And to your point though, or kind of to the point, 2 to 3 months was effectively your gut visceral reaction there to time in the field. I mean, that compared to some other industries, that's not all that long.
No, but that was an everyday application too.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, you take like a manufacturer rep, for instance, who might be on site once a month for a few hours, right? To add that time up to be 2 months, constant trained would take years, to become that well versed.
And like anything, I've lived in that sales role as a manufacturer's sales rep. And while you may know the spec sheet, of your product inside and out, that doesn't tell you the whole story of the product that you're going to use. It's when it's applied in the field, whether it's a pump or a truck or a crane or a chemical grouting. It's the performance in the real world beyond the spec sheet that really tells you or completes the picture of your education on your product. So for those who are on the manufacturing side, time in that field actually doing the work, I think is one of the most critical parts of it.
For sure. I mean, we liken it to a mechanic, who can listen to an engine and, give you a pretty good idea of what he's up against. Very similar in the field. Charlie, who I mentioned, I think he's been in a field services role for, 15, 16 years as well. And, he can kind of tell you what's happening by the way the hose is jumping, for instance, on each stroke, in the sound of the stroke, for instance. And, there's a lot of that mechanic sort of level field support that just isn't that readily available in the chemical grouting world. We put Charlie in the field services director role because, and this isn't, this is not intended to go into a sales pitch, but just to your point that, a lot of manufacturers are kind of shying away from the field support, where you have to be out there seeing so many customers and making so many calls. And, it's like a telemarketing, solution sometimes for an industry that is so critical, for accuracy in the field, so I agree with you completely. And we actually tell our guys, you said you had experience on the, on the sales side of it from a manufacturer. And we tell all of our guys and girls, get in the field and spend time with the contractors. I mean, I still go out in the field. I was just on a job, a couple Fridays ago. We were doing polyacrylate gel injection. I was on the gun, and I was saying to the technicians, you guys tell me, instruct me a little bit what you see out here. Cause the couple of people that were out there had significant experience. And to your exact point, manufacturers can read spec sheets and tell you, little nuances of performance from a TDS. But until kind of what the gun feels like, the guys in the field are still probably head and shoulders above you.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's always tough to be in that role where you're supposed to be the expert and asking for help. And so I've been in those situations. It's always uncomfortable as being on the manufacturer side to say, well, okay, what would you guys do here? And,
Right. Yeah,
leaning
but
on the guy with 30 years of experience.
yeah, but I think it takes a little humility and honesty. I mean, we have one regional manager who's really young in the industry. I mean, he's aggressive and smart, and his acumen for this is very high, and his learning curve has been great. But we tell him, hey, you're so young in the industry, just you don't have to know everything. You know what I mean? The one thing I really like about this industry is that I feel like on the contractor side, everyone is very, talking to Rich so many times throughout the years, he's always so, so generous with his information and how he does things. And, usually when I talk to him, it turns into a half-hour conversation about some different technique that he uses that I didn't know about, so, there's just no substitute for that interaction with the contractors, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
So, okay, well, we're hitting a, our timing mark here. I wish we could go on. We wanted to get into some of your unique projects. Maybe that could be topics for, another episode down the line. But do you have any final shots? You want to tell us anything else about your business, for instance, or maybe, geographically what you guys service, anything to that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to plug the business.
Sure.
We service all of Southern New England. Massachusetts is our home, but we go through Rhode Island, Southern New Hampshire, into Connecticut as well. We've been doing this for 25 plus years now. It's a family owned and operated business here. We try to treat it like a family owned and operated business. Everyone who we talk to is as a customer or a potential customer is we take it as personal as they do for the issues that they have, and we want to make sure that we're providing the right solutions to them, and we're not just here to sell product or sell service. We're here to solve their problems, because at the end of the day, doesn't matter how many things we put at it. If we don't fix it, it's not right, and people don't want to live with that. So we try to make sure we do the right thing for that customer in that house, and go from there. And we look forward to having my daughter, who's 6 years old, likes to come out on Saturdays and take a look at some of the jobs that we go out on. So hopefully in another 20 years, maybe she'll be ready to take the business to the next level.
Nice. I'm sure she loves seeing the foam. Most children really love that.
Oh yeah, they're big fans of when I come back with a little sample for them to see. Oh yeah, there's always little trinkets around the house of whether they're injection packers or sample cases that they always ask questions on. So keeps the fire on our side as well, to see them excited about something.
That's great. All right, Adam, well, appreciate your time, and please pass on our appreciation to Rich as well for lining this up and carving out the time for us, and look forward to talking to you more down the line.
All right, thanks again for having us.
Okay, thanks a lot.